And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the original mothership, 7 years of interviews, politics, civil affairs, civil liberties, scandal at coalitionradio.us. So joining us tonight, Community United for Positive Change, in collaboration with your city of Pawtucket. We've literally got an all-star lineup. This represents really an incredible cross-section of the Pawtucket, Rhode Island community. A variety of members and groups have been fighting for a number of years for equity in terms of local police affairs, civil rights, civil liberties, more control over their own economic future. It's just a wonderful group of people that I've met, and I've had the privilege of walking alongside with at a number of occasions as we've taken the coalition up to another level. I am proud to call these people friends. A couple of new acquaintances tonight, but folks that I'm looking to engage with here on the coalition to give them as broad a forum and a lectern and a pulpit as physically possible. So let's sort of go down the list, if you will. Joining us tonight is the incomparable Christine Bento. She's a member of CU4PC and also a member of Rhode Island Accountability, an organization that has graced us a number of times on these airwaves. Dimitri Lyssikatos, of course, of the Rhode Island Accountability Project, who, along with Christine and a group of volunteers, has managed, and folks understand that I have something of a national outreach, if you will, to civil libertarians, the Libertarian Party, and a variety of national civil rights organizations. I'm not aware of a project that accomplishes so much in terms of police accountability as the Rhode Island Accountability Project. When I describe what they do in terms of the information they present to the community, the challenges they face on a routine basis from the law enforcement community, people as far away as California have looked at me in stunned silence, and they want to know more. I'm meeting, of course, and well, I should say, first of all, someone that I've had the opportunity to meet at a number of if you will, protests and actions in Pawtucket is, of course, the City of Pawtucket Councilwoman at Large, and by the way, congratulations, Melissa DeRosa, who has already left her imprint on the City of Pawtucket. It is a new day because of her activism and her success. And someone I'm meeting really for the first time is J.O. Gonzalez. He's the chairman of the board of the Cape Verdean American Community Development Center, an active organization promoting employment, civil liberties, civil rights, equity, as well as a center that performs a great deal of outreach, improving the lives and conditions of not just the members of the CV community, but people in Pawtucket at large. And so, J.O., it's great to meet you finally. They run an active center in Pawtucket. We're going to talk more about that tonight and in the future. And I look forward to working with you as well. I'm just going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to turn the mics over to the real stars of tonight. But Communities United for Positive Change, CU4PC, and I'm going to read this from a release that they sent to me just about a week ago, and it's up on the website, by the way, if you go to the coalitionradionetwork.com. Not only their statement of being, if you will, their statement of purpose, but also a lengthy document that does a deep dive into the demands that they are making of the city that they live in, the city that they have a proud heritage in, the city they have a significant financial investment in, the city that their culture enlivens. So I always find it ironic that they, quite frankly, have to demand anything from a power structure that, quite frankly, in my opinion, and I am the host here, if you will, and I am station management, by the way, so I get to say these things, a community leadership structure that is in tatters and, quite frankly, is being rescued and brought back to relevancy by the activities of Councilwoman DeRosa and a group of other people. But so Communities United for Positive Change is a group of Pawtucket residents and community leaders who came together in the spring of 2020 after the George Floyd murder in an effort to address citywide concerns about accountability, transparency, racism, and abuse of power within the Pawtucket Police Department. J.O. Consalves, chairman of the board of the Cape Verdean American Community Development, which is located in Pawtucket. We are a group of diverse individuals who have agreed to work together despite not all holding these exact same opinions about everything. However, we are united in our desire for justice and trust that with collaboration and transparency, we can build a positive path forward that serves the community at large. And just briefly, after several months, it became apparent that they would have to put their demands and details pen to paper, and they have done so. And that's why I wanted to make sure we had them on right away, and so that they can explain their perspective. Ms. Bento, let's go with you first. First of all, a great collaboration of individuals. Congratulations on your effort here in terms of putting together a report that's both accessible, salient, and quite frankly, pretty damn blunt. Talk about the origin of your organization, what was driving it, and why you felt the need to establish this group to assert yourself in the community that, quite frankly, you're such an important part of.
Well, I guess during the George Floyd thing, even before the George Floyd thing, we spent so much time between me, Dimitri, Lynn Farinelli, and quite a few other people in the community, fighting at a lot of the council meetings, unheard actually all the time. Um, I'm very proud of the teams that I've worked with in the past, and I continue to work with them. Um, After the George Floyd thing and a lot of the protests were happening in cities outside of Pawtucket, I felt like giving them the opportunity, the city, the opportunity to choose if they want the same thing happening here, if they just wanted to talk it out with some other community members. And they chose to meet with us and talk it out. So I kind of handpicked a lot of the people that involved, because I knew they would fight in the same fight that I was. We have such a great team, such a diverse team of people. And we've been meeting, like I said, since around this time last year. We did give the city the option, do you want to meet with us and talk this out and see what we can do? And they said, yeah. And it went very well for a little while. I won't tap too much on it, but some of the community members were on the sideline, not necessarily coming into the meetings with us. For instance, Dimitri, he was doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Lynn Farinelli, she was also doing a lot of the, research for us. And a lot of the documents that we had provided came from Rhode Island Accountability. So we definitely appreciate all of their work. And I mean, I'm part of the team. I'm part of so many other teams too. So I definitely called up a few other people in the community that I trust, and called up JO, and I said, how do we do this? We have to get a group of people together from different walks of life, different organizations who need to come together and come meet with the city. Different people in the city we left it open. They can bring whoever they want. And I'll probably let J.O. kind of talk it out a little bit more, because I get so passionate about what's going on because I've been through so much with the city, a lot of retaliation back and forth, that I talk a little too passionately about it, and I say too much sometimes. So I'm going to pass it off to J.O. and he can kind of let you know, he can butter it up a little bit for the folks that don't like my straightforwardness.
J.O., take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And Pat, first of all, thank you very much. Appreciate the forum here. We have an opportunity to come together and talk about some of the issues that's going on in the city of Pawtucket. And thank you for all that you do in getting the word of the community out there to the general public. So much appreciated. So I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Pawtucket. Haven't lived there. I've been living in Connecticut for several years, but Pawtucket's been my home. I'm a chairman of the board at Cape Verdean Community Development, so I spend a lot of time investing in the community. My childhood home is there. My parents still live there, so I spend a lot of time there in the city, more so than in Connecticut. Christine often would come to us with some issues that's going on in the city of Pawtucket. And, and I always do a lot of fact checking with Christine, right? And it's like, hey, is that really going on? There's some things that she brings to me that's really hard to believe that is happening. And she's been able to give me evidence and prove that, these things are happening. And Christine and others have been fighting this battle, by themselves. And after the George Floyd murder that occurred, I think a lot of people are passionate. We all felt that there was a need to step up and do more. And we knew that there was some inequity that was happening right in our own city, our own backyard. And I think it was at that point, finally, I had enough and say, you know what, we got to do something. We got to back up Christine and others that's been doing a lot of work out there in the community. And they were holding it all together on their own. So putting a coalition of team members together, representing some different groups within that have a vested interest within the city of Pawtucket. And we may not always all agree on the same things, but I think we do agree on one thing, and that's really what's best for our community. The equity, we want to make sure that the folks are being treated fairly. There isn't any abuses that are being done by City of Pawtucket or other officials. And I have good contact with the City of Pawtucket, know the mayor well. I formed a good relationship with Police Chief Gonzalez. So I thought it was really important that we try to get everyone together in a room versus hitting the streets and protesting. We know protesting, it's been, we've been seeing what's happening across the country. And we know that protesting definitely has its place and it has been effective. And I think a lot of current themes that were going around around the country was very similar to some of the things that was going on in the city of Pawtucket. And some of the things we were seeing when I was seeing other protests, like, all right, what are the demands? What do they want? Who are they speaking to? Who are the leaders of these protests? So we took a little different approach. And the approach was, like Christine said, let's sit down with the city officials and talk to them. And we were very pleased that they were able to make time and meet with us. And we were meeting at some point on a weekly basis and every 2 weeks, and then it was monthly. But they did come to the table with us. We had an opportunity to share our demands, our issues, and hash them out. I'm not completely satisfied on some of the results and some of the answers, but I believe that we started something that's moving in the right direction. And we're appreciative of that partnership with the city officials to help move some of those issues forward.
Excellent. Councilwoman, from your perspective, you're obviously intensely involved with your community, and as a council person, you represent a pretty wide swath of Pawtucket. What if you were to give a report card grade to the relationship between the Pawtucket Police Department and members of I'll just say the community at large, how would you rate it right now?
Needs improvement. Definitely needs improvement. So first, let me say, Christine, I want to take a second and appreciate you for making that first step and call to bring us all together, especially on a topic that and a situation that can be very uncomfortable for people to to come together and address. And you picked a great group of individuals. You were very strategic about it, and I just want to congratulate you because
we just lost the councilwoman. If we can just ask you to try and get her back in. Folks, can the rest of you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
I can hear you.
While we're waiting for the council person to come back, Jim, maybe you can jump in. And let me turn the conversation over to you folks. I almost feel like I don't want to intrude in the natural flow of the conversation. But Jim, why don't you take it from here for a minute, and then Christine, I'm going to hand you in a sense the keys. Take it over and drive it in the direction. One of the things I think we should go through is reading. Do we have someone back? Oh, we've got her back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened.
it's part of the mystery of life in digital. Go ahead. You were starting to talk about Christine assembling the panel.
Yeah, I just wanted to appreciate you for bringing the group together. We've been working together for what it seems like a year, and we've had some good and bad moments, and I just love the fact that before we sat down with the city, we all understood that this wasn't going to be easy, and we all agreed to disagree and to attempt to find some common ground. So it has been very beautiful to see the communication and the things that have happened in the last year. So congratulations, Christine, on wonderful leadership. I just wanted to say that first. As far as for the Pawtucket Police Department, very interestingly, everybody here on this team, we all came with our own views, our own values, our own experiences. And I know quite often Christine and I went in front of the council over the years to bring up issues that we believed were things that we thought that the city should address, especially with law enforcement, with violence, with things that were happening in the community. And often it felt like we were alone. We were in the fight alone. Dimitri, thank you for, always being in the room with us and being the support. But yes, it felt like we needed to bring a stronger, bigger group together so that we can move things forward. I have seen the police department make some great changes and do some great things. I can't deny that. And I have seen them face many challenges as well. So when you ask for a grade, I can't give it an A, I can't give it a D. What I can say is that I see gaps in the relationship between the police and the community. And, I was a victims advocate, a street worker for 10 years. I responded to many shootings and homicides here in the city. And it just felt like a population that, has been affected, especially by law enforcement's work, and has been infected by violence. And I just didn't feel like we were getting what we really needed. And the more and more suggestions that I make to try to bridge that gap, I was met with a wall. So it's been very wonderful to be amongst great men and women leaders who are on the same accord of wanting the people in Pawtucket to feel safe and to have a strong relationship with the police. We had people, and interestingly, a PSA went out today. We had people in other communities attempting to lead the protests. And of course, if there's something that we need to protest about, we want to protest. But to see our surrounding communities be looted, businesses be torn apart, things that kind of energy is not what we wanted to see here in Pawtucket. And we felt like before that energy came here, we needed to do something. And that was to sit down with our administration and with the chief and say, hey, we're not saying you're awful, but you're not perfect. And what can we do as a group, as a team, to make the people in the community feel better and build that relationship? And I mean, that's what the conversation has been for a year, and it has been great.
Excellent. If any one of you dive in here, and like I said, feel free to take the reins of the show, but years ago, I rented some space in Pawtucket, and my personal experience watching them, and I'm just going to use the terms, get very aggressive with young people. Just let that, you can interpret that as you will. What is the MO of the Pawtucket Police? Is it still, that sort of cowboy environment where it's let's go in and bust up the knuckleheads and, we'll beat some sense into them? I mean, does that still exist in the city of Pawtucket?
Absolutely.
I think what has changed is cameras, is social media. So And I don't think that officers are very comfortable with the old style. I remember the old style. When we were at Payne Park and the police used to come to Payne Park, all we had to do was hear their brakes and we would run. And we weren't even doing anything bad. We would run because we were scared and didn't want to get in any trouble and knew that we can get in trouble for no reason, for just being in the wrong place in the wrong time or around the wrong person. It's different now, but it's not perfect. There's still, some officers who may need some training, some who are not handling calls the way that we would like them to. So I can't 100% say that kind of attitude is gone. And I have relationships with officers who've been on the force for umpteen years and can see the growth from when they were first came into the law enforcement and now, and know that things weren't right in the past, and have worked to make things better.
Christine, what are your thoughts?
And unlike Melissa, when I was a kid and the police pulled up while we were playing, we ran towards them. They were friendly. A lot of kids wanted to be police officers because of the friendliness of the police officers. They were older and they did the work because they wanted to. And a lot of them were local and they knew the neighborhoods and they knew the kids. So they were friendly because they knew who we were, knew that we were just having a little bit of fun. Now they're hiring outside. They're hiring people that are not equipped to handle the multicultural environment here in this city. So they come in inpatient, and hear Melissa say they used to run and hide. Nobody should have to run and hide from the police.
We
Feel
used
safe
to
enough
run.
to run up to them and say hello. You know what I mean?
We used to run
But
soon as we
I
heard the
think
brakes.
that when we see a lot of the police officers now, the younger ones, and acting like tough guys or whatever they're doing, whatever they think they're doing, being bullies, you know what I mean? God forbid anybody open their mouth and call them out on it. You become a target. Now you become the person who they're going to retaliate against because they want to see if they can shut you up. And some of us don't back down, so we become even more hated. So, and Jim Dimitri, he'll tell you, we've gone through it all. You know what I mean? It doesn't even matter anymore. It's becoming a little bit comical. Some of the cops just think it's all funny, But at the end of the day, the truth always comes out, right? And it's coming out now, and it's going to keep coming out. And I believe Jim can shed some light on it.
Jim, what are your thoughts? I mean, you've been around the community for years. You've got your own business. By definition, it's either word would have it, and this is where the issue obviously gets sensitive. White versus black, people of color. The challenges they face versus, say, established members of the community. We both have a mutual acquaintance who was once shooken down on his rental property for a gun that he had full permission to carry, and not that you should need permission, right, Jim? But he had the appropriate paperwork. He ended up spending a day in jail. Are the police in Pawtucket equal opportunity miscreants? How would you grade them?
Well, in that case there, they were uneducated, which is unfortunate, but they know the law. As far as what Christine and Councilwoman DeRosa was saying, I think when I grew up and hung out a lot Central Falls, more than I did in Pawtucket when I was a youngster. And I think we did both. We walked towards the police and then we ran away from them depending on what we were doing. But law enforcement's changed a lot. I think some of it has to do with the times. I mean, years ago, they were allowed to be more lenient because they weren't, there's a lot of fear now of lawsuits and whatnot. So there's certain things that they don't look the other way on.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole mentality of, we have a badge and we demand authority. and you must respect us. I think the bottom line is respect is earned, not demanded, and there's a disconnect there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been fighting this battle for accountability and transparency for a long time, especially in Pawtucket. The Pawtucket police have been less than truthful in their responses to my public records requests. I could go on forever. There were missing files that we knew were missing, so we'd ask for them again, and then they would find a few more. And then we would ask for more because we knew they were missing. Sometimes the only way to challenge these people is to have information that you're looking for that you already know about, and then they'll lie to you and tell you that doesn't exist, and then you have to provide some of it, and then you force them into releasing the rest of it.
And to be clear,
that's the battle I've had.
Right, and to be clear, your mission with the Rhode Island Accountability Project, for people who may not be familiar with it, is to document police misconduct and to air, if you will, very often it has to be redacted at some level, but to air, if you will, a constant stream of community-based complaints based on the realized behavior of police. These are very specific forms, documents. This isn't about attitude. This is about real life, real abuses. And the constant whack-a-mole, as I like to say these days, one of my new favorite words, that you have to engage in order to get police departments to comply with their well-established responsibility to disclose these events. How is that becoming harder?
Much harder. There's been unfortunately, a collusion between the police departments themselves and the Attorney General's office to step back years of public records law and public records cases. They want to step them back for greater secrecy. They didn't like what we were doing. Basically, we were the first people locally, and there aren't many states that have done this, but to try to put together a database of internal affairs reports. Lynn Farinelli and our goal was to create a database of internal affairs reports so that anybody could look up the town they live in, see the complaints that were made against their police officers, and then see the way that the city or town handled that complaint and judge for themselves whether they believe the city was doing the right thing. And, I challenge you to read some of these reports we have online. They're outrageous. Some of them are outrageous. East Providence comes to mind. You read East Providence, and you're going to wonder if some of the police officers that are in that report are still out there, and they will scare you. They'll scare you reading those reports, wondering if your mother or your sister will get pulled over by some of these guys.
Right. And again, you've got to not only overcome the biases of the local police department in that now famous thin blue line, which, by the way, as we're speaking right now, is being sorely tested in a number of communities around the country based on this just never-ending list of tragedies where young people are being killed in the streets. And I just want to take a moment to remind people that whether people are innocent or guilty of a crime, they never deserve to die for it. And there is a constitutional, yes, that word that's out there, constitutional. And I want to remind cultural conservatives that, yes, it's a constitutional requirement to protect individuals from cruel and unusual punishment. Yes, I used the constitutional words. I would remind people that exists, whether it's the ACI, whether it's the Wyatt, or whether it's lockup at the Pawtucket Municipal Building. It's again, whether or not you're guilty, that is irrelevant at all times.
And Pat, what some people don't realize is that in Rhode Island, Pawtucket is the city with the most police shooting of victims. Most people don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the cities, they're the ones with the most. It happens more often here. And what really became disturbing to me was years ago, one specific case of Dominic Silva, really motivated Lynn Farinelli to look into things, because the speech was saying one thing, people were saying something else. There was a young man narrating something within like an hour of it happening on Facebook, and then you get to the police story, and it's just like whatever they want to mislead the community to think is what they'll say. And sadly, the community will believe them because they are the police. Put it
Right.
in a report, must be true. But I was very disturbed to see how the superiors will go along with a story, add to it, um, put it out into the media, however which way they want it to go out, and then to top it all off, to find out that the city solicitor, who we all pay their salaries, right? But
Right.
they're working for themselves and each other. And then when you see we have a city solicitor who will go out of his way, he'll take violations from the AG's office. He doesn't care, costing us money to help cover up, to tamper with evidence, to destroy evidence, hide everything. This is all becoming so disturbing and out of control. And the politics and policing here in this city is absurd.
Jo, jump in here for a second. Tell us about what some of the functions your organization provides for the community. Again, not just for the Cape Verdean community, but the community at large, and what your thoughts are on all of this as you see it right in your face every single day of your life.
Yeah, so CACD has been around for about 25 years plus, and we want to be the heart of the Cape Verdean community. But as a nonprofit organization, we're open and provide services for anyone who needs it. In the past, we've done anything from having ESL classes, adult classes, GED. We partnered with a community organization to help with youth programs, youth job programs. And most recently, in the last year, we've been extremely active in providing COVID assistance to members of our community, getting the word out there, promoting testing, promoting vaccines, and helping to feed individuals that need help, as well as providing them household supplies, everything from gift cards to shopping bags full of supplies. So quite active in the community. But in that role, we also see as we want to be the community center when people having some issues or problems, they could come to us and we could join together to try to help resolve them with the city. So I think my role has always been a diplomatic one. What's the problem? Getting the right people in the room, let's try to resolve them. As you're hearing from others, yes, there's definitely some issues. I believe with the 14-page report that we were able to put together, where the report that we recently released is a combination of our demands, the issues, responses that we receive from city officials, as well as our response to their responses, right? Where they did provide some factual information about policies, procedures that exist. We've pushed back on some of them. There's some that we have to continue to fight with them on. Others we may have to go to more at the state level to change the process and through some legislation there to make some changes. But some of the things that I was pleasantly surprised to see that they do have on the books an anti-discrimination policy. They have on the books a social media policy that puts out what the standard is by the police department, city officials on how to behave on social media. They do have in their books policy procedures as far as like police brutality and use of force. So they also have in their books help whether it's training, psychological testing for the officers. There's a lot of things that I was happy to see that they had them in the books. Now, what's important is hold them accountable to enforce them. So when there's a violation from a police officer where they're doing something that's against their policy, is doing something about it. Police Chief Gonzalez did tell us that there's some things it's a personnel issue, and she assures us that it is being handled appropriately. We got to take her word for it, but we do want to see changes. She did say that there's much more violations or police officers are being written up more than before. There's some things that might have they just spoken to and got swept under the rug. But she said there has been a spike in write-ups and some violations, and we're hoping that will result in a correction of behavior by police officers. There have been some cases where they've gone through the labor process, where that's basically the Bill of Rights of police officers, and they have gone to in some situations through the process and was successful in firing police officers for violation of policy. The Bill of Rights is one of the things that our organization, we do want to go ahead and tackle at legislative level. I know that the state officials are looking at that. If you think of the process in Pat, you're probably familiar with it. And I think around the country, they've seen it as one of the most liberal policies that they have in place, where if a police officer committed some type of crime and the police chief wants to terminate them, they have to go through the state process where there's a 3-person board that's listening to the case. They're all police officers. One is a police officer appointed by the accused. One is a police officer appointed by the chief of police. And the third person is someone that they both mutually agree upon. So think of it, someone that's hearing your fate. If you committed a crime, 2 to 3 people are people that you approve to hear your case. Right. So it's not a surprise that a lot of these cases, when they go through the process, the officers are not terminated, not found guilty of whatever they've been accused of. So those are just some of the things that we got to go further and make some changes. I was
going to say there were two organizations that your cooperative, your coalition had sought to create. One was created by executive order, and that's the Mayor's Community Board. But it's been created and it appears to be largely inactive. And then, of course, you folks, like in so many cities, are looking for an internal review board to be created. Yes. One that's got real participation by the citizenry. And it strikes me from reading your report that, as is so often the case, there were meetings and quality communication, and then once you reach a certain point where you're enabling members of the community to have not just conversations, but impact, and I mean real impact, engaging, if you will, and having a participatory seat at the table where they can, be involved in hirings, firings. That's where it, as I've seen across the country, that's where it always seems to kind of get tied up. And I'm assuming, based on the timeline here that's in your discussion, that's what precipitated this report and this list of demands. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, we were seeing that there were things were slowing down, and we know that COVID had slowed some things down. The city officials, several of them were tested positive, including Mayor Grebian. So there were some pauses there. But we're at a point where we really did want to move forward and get the report out there. Now, as you mentioned, the Community Advisory Board that's set up at via executive order by Mayor Grebian, I believe, back in October, that was a direct result of our meeting, and where we wanted to have much more of a voice at the table. We originally were pushing for a community review board and a police oversight board, where we have an opportunity to hear cases, to have an opinion on what kind of if the policies were being broken, and have a voice as to what should be done to the police officer, and having that oversight. And I'll tell you, they rejected it. They did not want to have a community review board, which is not uncommon across the country. Throughout the entire country, no police officer, no one wants an oversight review board, community review board to double check what they're doing. So not surprised that they went against it. So instead of having the community review board, the mayor, we did talk about having the community advisory board. The community advisory has been formed. The group has been put together, and I have been appointed by the mayor to be part of that board, as well as another member of our group, Eric Lopez. We have our first meeting scheduled the first week of May. So I think as we started pushing out the report, it was great to see that we do have a meeting on the books. And what our plan is we want to introduce this 14-page report over to the community board to be able to share, hey, here's the struggles, here's what he's going through. And we want the community, it's a community advisory board, or the mayor's community board is what it's being called. Sorry, the mayor's community board. We want them to basically take the baton from us of what we started and complete, pushing back to the city and pushing for things like the community review board, the oversight committee, and anything else that's in a report that has not been resolved. We want to be able to push that forward. So that is a good thing.
No, I understand.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, please go ahead, buddy.
I just want to ask you a question. 5 years of internal affairs reports. Chief Tina Gonzalez said that she wasn't allowed to release those. Is that what she said? According to the APRA?
So it had to go through an APRA process. I'm going by memory here, so the others could correct me if I'm wrong or not. Anything that was generated, a internal complaint that came from a community member, those are ones that she should be able to release. But any internal report where it was derived from within the police department, those she could not release. And Christine and Councilwoman DeRosa, that your recollection?
Yes, that's
exactly. Yeah. I just want to say that that's a mistruth. She doesn't have to use the APRA. This is, and I said this to Christine, I've never met you, J.O., so I just wanted to let you know this now. But that's not true. She can release it outside of the APRA. Police chiefs and mayors do this all the time. If she wanted to, in good faith, release those reports, she very well could. So she's hiding behind some nonsense, to cover the fact that she doesn't want to release them. So I just want to be clear about that, and I wanted to put that on the table because I need to call her out on it, because that's nonsense.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. We asked her about it, and we point blank, asked her like, why can't you release it? It's public information.
She can.
And she just kind of there's a process. Yeah, and we did say
everything was pretty much a process with them. I mean, when we would ask a question, because we were trying to have like a human type of interaction with them, we tried. But every time you ask a question that they should be able to answer right away, in my opinion, it was always, we'll get back to you with that, of course, because now they've got to go check with the legal department, and they've got to go everybody on the same page on how they're going to answer it. And all that kind of stuff pretty much bores me, because I think that if we hired humans to do this work, be able to talk to us like humans, there's got to be a human side to everything, or else what are we doing here? I just didn't like that everything was a pushback. Everything was a pushback. One of it was always kind of me. Not too much truth to the story, but
Christine, if I can give you
I
an
have
example,
received everything. So yeah, go ahead.
If I give you an example, we talked about SROs, sort of police officers within our schools. Mm-hmm. And we know that there was a history where in a couple of the schools where higher minority population, there was incidents that were occurring with the police officers, and there was a sharp increase in arrests that were happening. And we want the schools to be safe, right? And no one's questioning that, but we want to make sure that it's a good partnership. So we talked about it, and the police chief said that, hey, the data shows that having the police officer in a school is making a difference. And it's been supported by the school committee and city council. We're like, oh, great. I mean, if there's good data that's out there that's saying our schools are safer and it's working well, share the data with us. And we'd love to work with you in promoting and saying, hey, SROs work. And it was a simple request. I mean, if you have a good story to tell there, share the data, and we'd be happy to promote it and say, hey, we want the officers to stay in the schools because it's working. And we just don't have the data there to back that up.
I had some data that suggested that a lot of violent situations and fighting and all kinds of other things were happening inside of Slater Junior High School. So I was hoping that she would share some data because I already had it. But, you know, timing was a little short. You know, I didn't really want to like prolong most of the meeting. So, you know, we went along with whatever they said, but I was waiting to get to the point where we can kind of put out there what we have, you know, to kind of set the record straight. But the opportunity never came because, of course, the meetings started coming, you know, slowing down a little bit. Oh, they couldn't meet because of this, couldn't meet because of that. So we were pretty much like Dimitri said in the beginning, asking for information that technically we already had. But it was the lack of transparency on her end. And she always had an excuse as to why they couldn't give us the information or they didn't have it. Some of it I already had. And that's what gets very frustrating, Pat, is because we know
Right.
what we're talking about. And we wish
Mhm.
you knew what you were talking about. We wish you had the answers that we're looking for because we already have the answers. But it's always this big watch the image, you know. Protectors gotta look like they know what they're doing, and you can't let no one tarnish the image.
Oh,
Well, you can't fix anything if you don't realize it's broken.
right. And I'm going to use an example. I think that'll bring a smile to Christine's, a knowing smile to Christine's face. Something that we'd worked on in the past. While all this is going on, and of course, I think we all realize at this point in society, everyone who can use COVID as an excuse or something to hide behind will. I mean, remember, our Verizon, our cell phone company, won't answer our phone at night because they care about the safety of their employees. Huh? And what it really means, they want to save money. In the case of this, somehow, despite the challenges of COVID, despite the insurmountable, if you will, challenges of day-to-day governance during a pandemic, they still managed to build, or at least build on the legislation to build the damn soccer stadium. Somehow, Christine, they were able to overcome the unovercomable to push forward their damn soccer stadium. Isn't that always how it works?
They're very selective when they want to do the work. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, if it's gonna make them look good, all of a sudden, you know, everyone's feeling fine and dandy, and things are moving forward, and you know, great for Pawtucket. Yeah, but when we have serious issues that are impacting families and communities that the community feels are important, those are not as important to them. And then every excuse in the book gets come out, and we're supposed to pretend like we don't see this happening. That
Right. Now, and again, all of you are intimate with the community. You all hold leadership positions within your community. You know what's going on every day. And so let's get to the report itself, because there's quite a bit in this, and we may even have to do a second show. But there's quite a bit in this that needs to be addressed. And here's the sad part from my perspective. The notion that in the year 2021, particularly given the events of the last, I was going to say of the last year, but one could even say the last few days, the notion that we still have to decide, we have to have a conversation about banning police chokeholds is astonishing to me. And I'm not faulting you for bringing it up, because I know it's a critical, sentient issue in the day-to-day life of people in the city of Pawtucket, in the city of Providence, anywhere there are communities where there's an imbalance of power between law enforcement and the rights of the individual. These issues exist. And haven't we learned from Ferguson? Haven't we learned anything yet? But so let's go through some of these. Let's talk about police chokeholds. You know, as you guys point out quite adroitly in your statement, the Police Chiefs Association will tell you that this doesn't exist. Does this exist?
There is a ban on.
I made a point in one of our meetings to say that, you know, in Pawtucket, what happens a lot is it becomes an excuse for using, you know, all this extra power that they have, or control, or abuse. You know, I'm just a realist. I see things totally different. You don't have to use a chokehold, because technically, if you're so afraid of the person, you should be waiting for backup. You should not be that close to the person to begin with. If the person is unarmed, then you're just using a chokehold for the wrong reasons. You're armed. You can taser them. There's so many other things that you can do, right? So if I'm a police officer and I'm close enough to use a chokehold, most of the chokeholds we see being used are after another police officer has gotten there. And situation is getting a little bit out of hand and somebody gets a little bit too power trippy, you know, and all of a sudden someone's being put in a chokehold because they're being thrown down to the floor. It's if you're that afraid, most cops say because there was a fear of their life. Shouldn't be close enough to administer a chokehold if you're in fear of your life. You're fighting somebody. Know that some people, I understand, you know, some police they'll say that they're trained. Some people are trained and probably could fight a police officer. I understand that. That's all the more reason why police officers should be more careful when they're approaching someone. Feel like you're in danger and you're gonna need a chokehold to get yourself out of the call for backup. Don't approach the person. I mean, you're armed and someone else is not armed. There's no need for a chokehold. I think that's just an excuse that they use in case you choke someone to death. Well, that's why we need to use a chokehold, right? I think it's just an excuse. That's my personal opinion.
Councilwoman DeRosa, you wanted to jump in. You wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you the technical here. The Chiefs Association said that they're banning all chokeholds unless the police officer feels their life is threatened. I mean, that kind of sounds like the same policy that we have had, correct? I'm not sure if this is something new that they created, but when we're talking about chokeholds, it would make the community feel better if they knew that you guys are not allowed to use chokeholds no matter what. And I think because you are armed and that should not be an option. So the NAW's Jim Vincent and his organization, because I get the words all mixed up, they are pushing to ban all chokeholds. Skip the rest of the sentence. Ban all chokeholds. And what this group is asking the Pawtucket Police Department is to join Jim Vincent in his fight to get this piece of that policy changed. So, you know, the chief has says there's an anti-chokehold policy that is in place. And she is part of the Chiefs Association. But when they handed, you know, their recommended, like, you know, amendments to what they were putting out for the Chief Association, I believe our chapter here didn't get it in time. And so that part of the policy was not changed. So that, you know, that's something where we want to continue the fight because we would like to see all chokeholds banned as a use of force, period. We just got traumatized 8 minutes and watched somebody, a police officer, take a black man's life on national television. I think it is safe to say that we need a ban on chokeholds. So Pat, I you know, though there's like wordings here, little things here, even on like the badges. You know, Pawtucket police officers no longer wear name badges; they have numbers. Now,
wait. Let me jump in there though a second. This isn't something I was aware of. You're telling me that if I'm in a situation, and I think we all know there's a lot of different situations that can take place, I have to register with myself that number and then walk it back. How is it possible in an era? I don't want to beat to death what might seem a minor point for some, but in an era when we all virtue signal about community policing, how is it possible that the officer's name, just for that simple level, to familiarize yourself with the community, to make the community feel more comfortable in addressing you by your name as opposed to a number, or having to feign, if you will, like royalty, you know, eyes cast properly downward, walking out of the room, making sure not to show the officer your back. I mean, how is that possible in the year 2021?
I figured it out a few years ago, and no one knew that it was going on. Actually, I don't even know how it started, but it was during an accident that I had pulled over to help out, and the officer wasn't trying to take witness statements from anyone, and I was like baffled by it. So when I looked at what his name was, he didn't have a badge on at all. No number, no name at all. He didn't have anything. And I said, why aren't you taking witness statement? Then who are you? And he said he didn't have to tell me. So I asked the officer next to him who he was. And the officer says, well, he said he didn't have to tell you, and we don't need to wear our name badges anymore. That's how I had found out. It was maybe 3 years, maybe more than 3 years ago. So I brought it up at a community meeting, and no one seemed to know what I was talking about. And I think till this day, a lot of people don't realize that the Pawtucket police officers don't wear name badges. And the problem we have in Pawtucket is that a lot of police officers refuse to identify themselves. So, long story short, in these meetings, the mayor agreed and the chief agreed. I think everybody in the room agreed, right? That what sets off a police officer is you asking them their name when they pull you over. Why would we want to set everybody up that way? It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what background you are. It doesn't matter what age you are, what gender you are. You ask a police officer his name right off the bat, something is not going to go good with you from that point on.
Right. It ends badly.
Why would you want to set them up that way? And I mentioned that to the police officer, to the chief and the mayor. And, you know, they pretty much agreed. I've been in several incidents where a police officer refused to identify himself. Another officer has asked him to identify himself and he refused. So, you know, again, I'm a realist. What I say doesn't always come out, you know, how people care to hear it. But if we have a Pawtucket Police Department who act like 5-year-olds and refuse to identify, then they should go back to the easiest thing, wear your name badges, and we don't have to worry about it. Another interesting thing that had come up, right, was that I said to the chief.
I'm sorry.
If I could jump in here. This name badges, if you think, and I apologize for interrupting you, Christine. This is a simple thing that we could resolve. Like through these meetings, it's a simple thing that we can do that would have a big impact on our community. The police chief did tell us that they are required to name number badges. And it was a contractual agreement they made recently. This was in I think the early part of 2020 when they signed the new contract. I forgot the month in 2020. They signed the new agreement with the police union, which allowed them to not have to have name badges and only required to wear numbers. I mean, it's ridiculous because, like Christine said, it does put someone in a situation where they're asking for a name and it starts a confrontation. You know, this is just one of those things where it's a simple thing. And in the 20 for 20 by the police chiefs of Rhode Island, they basically said all police officers in the state of Rhode Island shall provide the name and badge number at any time if requested. Not saying you have to have one on, but it's saying at any time requested you must give. Now, my question to the police officers is, what are you afraid of? Why don't you want people to know your name?
Right.
Are you doing something that's wrong and you don't want people to know who you are? Like properly identify. And as you said, Pat, in community policing, it's great to be able to address an officer, Officer Smith, you know, to be able to properly address them and have to have that confrontation to worry about. This was something that we were all very passionate about. And it's unfortunate that we were not able to resolve it because it was a police union agreement. It was a contract that was signed that we were trying to stall and get that contract signed and waiting for us to go through some of these issues so we could tackle issues like that. But
let me add one more thing. Let me add one more thing before Melissa makes a good point, because I know where she's going with this. But you know me, Pat. You know I've got receipts, and I come a little bit correct, so they don't like that about me. But I said to the chief, I gave her an example, right? When I get pulled over, and I want to know who that officer is that's pulling me over, right? I asked her a direct, simple question. Is there somewhere I can pull up online on my phone so that I can match that number with a name? And she said no. Another reason why sometimes I have a hard time trusting them, and you know, people wonder why, or they wonder why. But here's the thing. What happened maybe a few weeks later was through Rhode Island Accountability, thank you to Lynn Farinelli and Mitri, I was able to acquire a list of names that went along with the badge numbers, which everyone should have. So they didn't have that available. They didn't know where I can find it, but I had it. And so you can definitely find out who they are through their numbers, but why should you have to go through all that work
Right.
to find out who you're dealing with weeks later?
You know,
So,
we were called evil. We were called
Councilwoman,
evil for publishing that list.
which is
Oh no, I was just about to say, Jim. You know, when we were we had a meeting, and then you know the police contract was coming up. We had so many people come to the council meeting and ask them to stall the police contract a little bit to give us some more time. The city assured us that none of the demands that we made had anything to do with the contract. And then when we went and addressed the demands, they were like, that's a contract issue. That's a contract issue. So we're saying, well, how can we make an adjustment to the contract? And they said that we would need to meet with the fraternal or the FOP president, and that the FOP can make amendments to the contracts. Guess what? They refused. I don't know who refused, but what was said was that the FOP president was not willing to meet with us at all. But I had the FOP president in my cell phone stating that no, this is what I'm saying. I had the FOP president in my cell phone sending me messages saying that he wanted to attend a CU for PC meeting. But then when the mayor and the mayor came to the meeting, he said he didn't want to come, and that he didn't want to come, and that he would make no amendments to the contract because of what Christine had shared on her Facebook, which was the IDs matched with names that she had made a post.
Well, and I just want to introduce.
That is the difficult kind of conversations that we had to have with the mayor and the chief and with the folks. And that's the kind of we use the word absurdity, and that was one of them moments. Go ahead, Jim.
Why is he mad? Why is he mad over a public record? That is a public record. It is legal in Rhode Island, and he's upset. He's using it as leverage not to attend the meeting. Well, that's ignorant. I mean, all I can say is that's ignorant. If he has a problem, go to the State House and change the law, which he's already trying to do right now for other public records requests that he doesn't like. So he can go and do that if he doesn't like it. What are they trying to hide by keeping the names off the uniforms? What logic, what excuse can you possibly give for doing that?
I don't know.
Like to hear
I know that
there's a.
I know, like Christine, sorry, Pat. I know, like Christine, I have went to several scenes in the last year, before we were meeting, and officers wouldn't identify themselves, and I have that knowledge. I'm like, you're not gonna give these people your name. Like, they can go into the police department and make a complaint, and you can be in trouble. You're willing to deal with that? But I wasn't paying attention, and I don't like to nitpick of what the officers are doing, and I don't like to force people into complaints. If you want to make the complaint, go ahead. You don't, But I was flabbergasted for a while until then. I'm like, oh, they don't have to wear name badges, and that makes them feel like they don't got to say a name. I've been on scene for officers, and people have requested names, and they won't give them. And it's frustrating because for me, I don't need to get a call from somebody who's like, I'm over here asking this officer his name, and he don't want to tell me. I'm going to the police department right now. I don't want to deal with that just because of a name. We have so many other things to deal with that providing your identity just should not be an issue. And like Christine said, if we're going to act like 5-year-olds and put the community residents through the obstacle course of just finding out what your name is, then let's go back to wearing the name badges so that people don't have to ask them questions.
And I'm going to say something that people hear me say all the time. In Pawtucket, we have the most diverse community here, right? And it's very safe to say that a lot of people have language barriers. So if a person who speaks English can't get their name, imagine the position of someone with a language barrier and with who the police officer clearly sees is going to have an issue finding out who they are. They are risk of possibly losing their lives or getting hurt during this traffic stop for daring to ask a name, because the officer already knows they're going to have a hard time finding out who they are, because the system also is not even easy to navigate in Pawtucket.
There's a movie out right now, and it's been nominated for an Oscar, and it's based loosely on true life. And it's called The Trial of the Chicago Seven. Chicago Seven were a bunch of anti-war protesters. It's an amazing movie. I was disappointed that they took a few licenses with it, but possibly one of the most compelling scenes that's done 2 or 3 times in flashback is you see a bank of officers, and it's clearly a period piece. It's set in the 60s. And the gentleman who plays, I think it was Abby Hoffman, says, the last thing in the world you want to see is this. And they flash the police officers who are taking their badges off and putting them in their pockets. The license, and again, I'm going to date myself here with a Beastie Boys reference, but the ability, the license to ill, when you feel like you can act, right? That you can act completely anonymously, that you, in a sense, have a license to ill, that you have a complete license to engage in the behavior because of the anonymity, and now the legal anonymity under which you can operate is terrifying. Is absolutely terrifying to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. A great movie. I saw it. I saw it a couple of times. Loved the movie. And that was happening. Yeah, that was in the 60s, the period piece. But that was happening in protests across the country, where the officers were blacking out the names of putting tape over their name badges or the badge number, taking them off. And there's a lot of police officers that are basically in unidentifiable clothing and acting on behalf of the police. So it's still happening.
I want to cover one more area, and what I'm going to suggest is, because we've gone on for about an hour now, I want to suggest one more area on your demands to cover, and then I'd like to, and I'm talking about in the next couple of days. I don't want us to lose track of this. Is a critical conversation that's clearly much more detailed and more involved than even I thought possible, and I want to respect every single step of this effort. And I also want to use this first segment, if it's okay with you guys, as sort of a rallying cry for people to pay attention as we all work through this process together. And the section that I think is critical is your demand B, which is demilitarize the police, remove police riot and military gear. I just want to point out 2 things quickly, and I'd love your reaction to that. Ferguson, Missouri. We all know about Ferguson, Missouri. The United States Department of Justice, my understanding, has actually issued 2 reports about Ferguson, Missouri. The one that everyone is familiar with is, of course, the events leading up to and including the actual rioting. Less well publicized is an investigatory piece done about the, if you will, the mental status of the community, the relationship at the time of this event, the relationship between law enforcement and the community, and which ultimately helped precipitate the riots that we know as Ferguson. And a lot of reference is made to the notion of an invading force, that because the surplus of our Mideast war adventures are so readily available to police departments, that in fact police departments can, I think the term, if you're a veteran, recent veteran, is battle rattle. And battle rattle is all that gear that you can pile on and look like, and I'll refer to an incident that I was involved in Pawtucket. I call it the Providence incident. I call it the Providence Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And of course I'm talking about the battle rattle that they wear. I happen to be in the center, I found myself in the center of I'd call it a mini riot that took place behind the public safety building this past summer. And folks, right-wing supporters of Donald Trump were on one side, and on the other side, and this is in the heart of a community, who felt like they'd have been invaded, were members of folks looking for, the same type of response to issues that you folks are raising, which is simple police justice in a community that is theirs. Because ultimately, we all need to remind ourselves when we look at a conversation like tonight and we look at the conversation we're starting, that this is your community. You live there. You may rent. You may own. Irrelevant. This is a place where you and your families live. And there's no implied ownership by municipal government for the city of Pawtucket because somebody got elected mayor. None of that. It just simply doesn't exist. You own this community, and quite frankly, you have every right to dictate the method by which it's policed. In fact, not only do you have a right, you have an obligation. And when people talk about defunding the police, I say that's simply not going far enough. We need to eliminate the police. And then we need to reestablish a police department that's operated from the ground floor up, if you will, from a community, in which the community decides the approach to everyday law enforcement issues. What happens if someone gets caught with an unregistered vehicle? Driving an unregistered vehicle should not be a death sentence. Simply getting caught with some weed should not land you in a cage. It just shouldn't. Simply being disrespectful or acting childish, she give you a stern talking to from your mama or your priest or your minister. It should not again land you with a permanent police record on that pipeline to prison that we all talk about. So I feel very strongly about the militarization, if you, of our police. Give me a snapshot, if you will, before we close off for the night, and then schedule appearance too, because it looks like we could spend another hour on these issues easily. But what is the status of the militaristic look and behavior of Pawtucket Police Department? You specifically mentioned an event on Sisson Street, and I'm familiar with Sisson Street. What happened, and why the need to act like an invading army in a community that you own?
Guys want me to take this one, or?
Yeah, go right ahead. Dive right in.
This is a topic that we talked about, and I first saw about it on Facebook, and it was posted by a family member, an individual in Sisson Street, where it did look like a war zone, where the way the police officers were marching down, they had batons that looked like baseball bats. And they were kind of like marching down into the street, and it was a very intimidating show of force. And people were scared. And it really has this kind of like us versus them mentality when you see this happening in your neighborhood, in your street. The explanation that we received from police chief is that they have some outdated riot gear that they were prepared because they were on standby with what was going on in Providence. They may have to respond to what was happening in Providence, so they were dressed in that gear. There was a call out for on Main Street in Pawtucket where there was a shots fired, a report, and the police converged on the scene. And then there's other factors that brought them onto Sisson Street. Now, from what the police chief is saying is that they do not have military vehicles or military grade vehicles. This is something that they haven't used in many years, and they hope not to have to use it again. But it was, and that was a reason that they gave, and we were somewhat satisfied with the response. But one of the things that we did ask them to do was to apologize to the family that felt intimidated, and they were the police officers were going to their home. They didn't go onto their property, but definitely show of force was directed towards this particular home. And we asked for a direct apology. Direct apology never happened to the family. There was a statement that they put out there. It was very short of an apology, but they did address it, but just not enough. And I think things like that, when that happens, communication is key with the community. Explain what happened so that it could help diffuse any issues that may be out there.
Right. No, I'm with you. Again, we've run long. Oh, go ahead, buddy.
Pawtucket did have a SWAT team, didn't they? At one point.
Was that Dimitri?
Pawtucket did have a SWAT team a few years back, correct?
I'm not sure. Councilwoman DeRosa, you're on mute. Melissa, you're on mute.
Yeah, I believe.
I said I'm sorry. I can't answer that question. I really don't know.
Yeah, I believe they did.
It's.
I believe they did, and the only reason that they don't have a SWAT team now is because they lost the federal funding that was putting that team together. So whatever they have left is probably left over from the SWAT team that they did have.
I
Rest assured, if they were able to get federal funds, they would have one today. I mean, boys love their
So
toys, and this is how it works. They get money from the federal government to grants to get the like Pat said, the surplus military gear. And when the federal government is giving the stuff out and the police departments apply for it and get it, you know, you want to use it. These guys, these are like, if you have it, you're going to use it. You're going to show your force, a show of force. And
when we
that's
first
basically what they
brought
did.
up the topic of that whole Sisson Street situation, um, before we got into detail on our side, the chief actually mentioned that they do not have riot gear, period. Until we said, well, this is what they look like. They were in full riot gear and they had, police bats. And she tried to say, well, we don't have bats. And here's where I stand with it, right? I'm always going to be on the side of the community, right? I'll side with the police if they're right or whatever, but I'm a community advocate for a reason. And at some time during some of these meetings, I was told, "Oh, we can't figure out what side you're on." I'm always on the side of the community. Let's just get that clear. Okay? I know police officers. I'm friends with police officers. I'm related to police officers. However, I'm on the side of the community because at the end of the day, what matters to me is how the community sees what's going on. That family was an older man, and he had a bunch of small children sitting on the porch with him. What those children had to see were police officers in different looking gear with these brown bats in their hands standing outside their house. Okay. And I like to be very articulate to give you a kind of a vision of what was going on. This man is yelling out in Creole, Cape Creole, what is going on here? There was obviously a language barrier going on. And the police took a stance as if they were going to come and invade this man's property. It was thanks to a neighbor. This was all live on Facebook. I was watching it. I was heading over there as I was watching it. Thanks to a neighbor who spoke Creole, who came over and asked the police officers what is going on, because this man is afraid and he's afraid for his life, and his children are sitting on the porch, which is what they always do. Why are you guys approaching this house like this? And she walked over and spoke to his officer, and all of a sudden they just went away. Very weird. They just got in their cars and drove away. It's almost like they were heading back to the police department. They wanted to create action. This is not funny. You don't just create action because you want to make it look like your image, like as if you're doing something, because it looks differently to the community members. And this is what's important to me, is how the community is viewing this. That was unnecessary show of force. Just because you were heading back from somewhere, you don't just stop somewhere so that you can scare everybody and show them that you're prepared for everything. That's not important. And then for you to say you don't have riot gear. Oh, we don't have riot gear, but we do have old riot gear that we used that day. Well, you either have it or you don't. And if you have old riot gear and I'm telling you they look like police bats, don't correct me and tell me it's a baton. I speak English. I know what a baton is. And I could have said baton. I'm speaking on behalf of the community that they look like bats. There's a big difference here. There's a cultural misunderstanding going on between the police and the community, which is so unfair to some of these people who live here. Because depending on how they word something, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, they don't know what they might not know what they're talking about completely, but what they know is how they feel and what they're seeing, which is what the police don't want to hear, which is what the mayor don't want to hear, which is what the chief don't want to hear. All you want is their tax money to put in your pocket and go pay your mortgage elsewhere, while you come into our communities and treat us like a bunch of idiots that don't know better. Right. And I don't think that's fair. And I said it several times in the meetings. I've said it outside the meeting. I put it on my Facebook. If they don't want to work here, that's okay. Don't fire them. Tell them to leave and go apply where they live, where they can go and harass their neighbors. Leave ours alone. Just that simple, guys.
It really is, isn't it? Well, with your assent, I would like to continue this conversation in the next couple of days, because clearly a lot more here than meets the eye. You've got 14 pages of important issues that need to be addressed. And I'd like to continue this. Are we all good with that?
Absolutely.
Sounds
Great.
good. Yes.
Thank you all for coming on the coalition tonight. Again, it's the door is open. I'll just close off with this thought. The real tragedy here is that these conversations are taking place across the country right now in virtually every community where there are marginalized residents, folks who are facing. There's something about the need of government to dominate people who have other issues in their lives they should be dealing with, not having to contend with a police department who's just, I don't know. I feel like I'm having flashbacks to the 50s. Dimitri, J.O., you saw the movie. I feel like it's got that 1960s feel where you see these jackbooted thugs who feel like they can work out their frustrations on local community members who, ironically, are the heart and soul of Pawtucket. And it just needs to end. And I applaud all of your efforts in putting together this report. And if it takes us a couple of times to go through it, we will go through it step by step, right? Dimitri, inch by inch, slowly we'll creep. But we will focus on every single aspect of it until they cry uncle.
And I sincerely want to thank you, Pat, for all the support that you do, that you give us, and anytime we're doing something in the community, you realize the importance of getting the word out there so that people don't say, well, this is us versus them. No, it's not. No. We are all supposed to be on the same page, and we're not fighting them, right? But we become their enemy because they say so. It's not the other way around. We are on the same page with them. We're trying to help the police serve us better. But they want to see us as the enemy who want to shut them down, and we don't want to work with them. And it's very obvious. It's becoming very obvious in a silly kind of way that they're the ones who refuse to work with us. Community policing in Pawtucket, forget it. And I don't feel the same way that I feel about Pawtucket police across the board with the whole entire state, because we have very diverse police departments elsewhere. Pawtucket is not a diverse police department. It's almost like they go out of their way not to hire minorities. It's kind of a weird thing, but it's reality. And at this point, I don't even know why a minority would want to apply, because they're probably going to be treated the same way they're treating the residents. And until that changes, unfortunately, we're stuck with a police department that refuses to operate correctly anywhere near it. And it's a scary thing because we have to live here every day. And the more we talk, the more of a target we become.
Well, let me just introduce everybody in the room again. Christine Bento, community activist, both in the community at large as well as the Cape Verdean community. J.O. Gonzalez, of course, with the Cape Verdean Community Center, Activist Center, Community Trust, working actively on behalf of the youth that is enfranchised, the poor in the community. Of course, Councilwoman DeRosa, again, congratulations on your ascension to town council. That is the beginning of great, great changes. And of course, Dimitri Lyssikatos of the Rhode Island Accountability Center, who works at the Accountability Center with Christine Bento in documenting and making accessible, if you will, the bad behavior of police departments around the state of Rhode Island, but for whom the city of Pawtucket will always be a special love. Right, Dimitri?
I'm going to make a quick correction real quick. Rhode Island Accountability is more Lynn Farinelli and Dimitri. I just kind of support them in it.
Well, no, it's all.
We'll support each other. I mean, and I thank you, Pat, for giving everybody a voice here. There's not too many media outlets where people can get out there and get their message out. Thank you for being
right.
Anytime. You guys are all pals. I really, I consider, how does the statement go, Dimitri? It's an honor and privilege to enter the field of battle alongside of all of you. You make us better here. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. We broadcast on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio. We just ask simply if social media is, if you will, that's our jam. We need your support in social media simply by liking us, sharing us, subscribing to us, following us, however they just call it. on each of these platforms because it allows us to get our signal out, the voice of the community out to places we haven't been before. We need to rise above the quite frankly, the lazy mainstream media and present issues that really matter to ordinary, everyday working Rhode Islanders. And I appreciate your efforts in supporting us. Folks, we'll be back on the air tomorrow night. Tina Peterson runs a show called Ramp. Real access motivates progress. It is an astonishing work that is starting to receive national awards for her support of the, if you will, of the physically challenged community, showing them products and ideas and support to make their lives better. That's at 7 o'clock here at coalitionradionetwork.com and, of course, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. We're on 5 nights a week.